This is our fourth ever virtual online lunch and learn for the Osher Lifelong Learning Institute at the University of Utah. So we're delighted to have you all here with us. We have about 33 people on this Zoom webinar. My name is Jill Meyer. I'm the Osher Curriculum Coordinator, and it is my pleasure to introduce to you our speaker today. But first, I'd just like to do a couple quick Zoom housekeeping things. We will be taking questions from our speaker. If you have a question, I will be reading those. Please submit your questions in the bubble that is marked Q&A. That way I will get your chat, your question, and I will read it to our speaker and he will answer. If you would like to place a comment in the chat, that will be available for everyone to see. And you can chat amongst yourselves, but I will not be reading those directly to our speaker to have him answer. So choose your method of communication according to if you want it read out loud or if you just want community participation, which we so value at Osher, and we welcome that as well. So with that taken care of, I would like to now welcome Leo Lucey, who is the Chief of Investigations for the Attorney General's Office. Leo has a degree in sociology with a certificate in criminology from the University of Utah. He spent 20 years in the Utah Department of Corrections, serving in many roles there, from counselor and administrator to adult probation and patrol deputy director. He has also served for over 12 years in the Utah Attorney General's Office, where he is currently Chief of Investigations, working on a wide variety of crimes, which we are looking forward to learning about here. So please join me in welcoming Leo Lucey. Leo, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you for having me. It's my pleasure. So I was asked to speak to you all today about the Investigations Division of the Utah Attorney General's Office, some of the functions that we carry out, the types of investigations we do, and the various units that are underneath the umbrella of the Investigations Division. I'm going to start with describing the six, there's actually 7 units that are underneath the Investigations Division, and that'll give you an idea of the breadth of the types of cases that we look into here, as well as some of the other special functions that we play within statewide government and law enforcement. Currently, there's 6 sections, we refer to them as, or units within the Investigations Division of the Attorney General's Office. Those consist of our CDI unit, which is a unit assigned to the Social Security Administration. It's a federal task force. We supply 4 investigators as well as a support staff to that task force. They work for that task force full time and are funded primarily by that task force. That group specializes in investigations of Social Security fraud, welfare fraud, or fraud against the federal or state government by individuals. Most of those investigations are within the state of Utah, although that unit has crossed over into Wyoming and some of the surrounding states to carry out some of those investigations. Once I've gone through these, I'll open up for specific questions on any of the specific sections, the unit as a whole, or anything else you want to discuss today. Our second unit is brand new. It was just established in our last legislative session. It's called the CASE unit. It is a consumer retail theft unit specializing in retail crime. Let me tell you the importance of that. State of Utah loses millions of dollars in tax revenue a year due to retail theft and retail fraud perpetrated by individuals in our community. If an item or items are stolen from a Home Depot, a Target, a Walmart, those are then normally stolen and resold on the black market or on web pages or that type of thing. The one thing that's left out in that transaction is any tax at any point, which goes back to the state government. The state looked into that closely. We did a couple of large pawn shop undercover operations in the last few years. The dollar amounts were staggering. We approached the legislature and they jumped on board in running some legislation to establish this unit. Here's the most unique thing about the unit, and to our knowledge, it's the only one in the United States right now that functions that way. It is 100% funded through private corporate money. So organizations like Home Depot, Target, Walmart, and many other large corporations actually fund that unit. So they pay for the operation and the function of that unit. We investigate crimes not only involving those companies, but all retail type industry throughout the state of Utah. It's a 2 to 3 year pilot project. So we're going to work very hard to do as many cases as we can and show what the return is for the state and for the private companies on their investment. And we're excited about it. It is right now being staffed by 2 individuals from the Department of Public Safety, a supervisor from the Attorney General's office, an investigator from West Jordan Police Department, and an investigator from West Valley Police Department. And we'll see what that grows into. It's patterned after another task force we have here that I'll tell you about in just a minute, but that's our case unit. Our third unit is a special investigations unit. It is staffed by 6 individuals, 5 investigators and a supervisor. That unit investigates political corruption, white collar fraud, identity fraud, election fraud. It's a catch-all unit. They basically take in any kind of case that doesn't fall under the bailiwick of one of these other specialized units. Needless to say, they're swamped at all times, especially during election years and those type of fun things that are going on. They barely can keep their head above float on a normal day, let alone when there's large election taking place. The next unit is the Secure Strike Force. That strike force they're primarily mandated and committed to investigating crimes committed by and against the undocumented community in the state of Utah. That's a vulnerable population. It's a highly predatory group. They get preyed upon, sometimes by their own and sometimes by outsiders. And this group is specially trained to investigate. They also have the mandate of statewide human trafficking investigations, as well as document mills or individuals that produce and manufacture and sell fake documents, driver's licenses, social security cards, identity cards, passports, that type of thing. They're comprised of 9 investigators and a supervisor. A few of those investigators are internal employees of the Attorney General's office. They are also staffed by an officer from Orem PD, and this is at any given time. They come and go. Orem PD, Ogden PD, Unified Police Department, Department of Public Safety. We have the U.S. Marshal's Office at different times. We also have many part-time investigators from other agencies, Park City, Heber, Wasatch County, Bountiful, Summit County at different times. And I'm sure West Valley, I'm sure I'm going to forget somebody, but just give you a description of the diversity and the representation that is on that task force. And all those various jurisdictions are impacted by crimes committed in those communities that I discussed. Our next section or unit is the Icac Task Force, Internet Crimes Against Children. They investigate all types of crimes being perpetrated against our vulnerable young population on the internet. That group has 9 internal investigators and houses a task force at any given time of up to 40 to over 100 additional investigative and officer assets from state, federal, and local agencies. All these task forces are extremely busy. Backloads beyond what you want to look at are waiting in the queue to be worked at any given time. So they simply investigate the cases, and there's one waiting right behind it. In reality, there are dozens waiting right behind every case that they finish. And then we house, it's called our virtual reality specialized training program. Let me describe the piece of equipment as a virtual reality simulator. So We can send officers, educators, politicians, media, citizens, citizen groups, anybody, media, if I didn't say that, I think I did, into that training system. And it places you in as close to a real life scenario. It's a 300-degree simulator that you're standing in up on a platform. You can speak to interact with the screen and the episodes that are playing in there. You can talk your way out of using force. You can escalate to where you have to use force. It gives you a chance to be trained. It's simply not a shoot simulator like most of us were trained on over the years, a shoot, don't shoot. This one gives you options to use all kinds of abilities to try to work your way, the officer working their way out of situations with the least amount of force possible. We specialize in de-escalation training. We have been very fortunate since the inception to have trainers in there with none of them had less than 35 to 45 years of experience. There's 2 full-time investigators in there now, and they add up to over 80 years of experience and knowledge. We also have incorporated in the nice thing with the training program, it can be adapted to what the community demands are, the legislative demands, what the issues are in the communities at any given time. Right now, a great deal of time is being spent on de-escalation. A great deal of the training time is being spent on interaction with individuals with mental health issues or other types of special needs individuals. It's a really unique and I think very proficient, cutting edge way of training officers in a way that they can see what their actions result in de-escalation or escalation, or how to work through those events in ways that maybe us old timers didn't have that type of training coming up over the years. So I want to throw this out to all of you. We have all kinds of groups that come through there. If any of you that are interested in this type of thing want to avail yourself of an opportunity to do that, you can do that through Connie Reed. She knows how to find me any which way. So if you want an opportunity, or we like to do it right now with COVID, we like to do it in groups of 2 to 4, not larger than that. If we do bring in larger groups, we'll break them up, put some of them in a classroom to get some classroom training. At the same time, we're overdoing the virtual, the realistic officer involved training in an adjoining room. So we can accommodate groups, but right now we're a little more careful than we used to have to be. But happy to at least let you come in. If you don't want to participate in it, that's great. You can come in and watch somebody else. It is a very realistic experience. You get great feedback. Most people are very surprised by what officers deal with every day in those situations. So that's our virtual reality specialized training unit. We also house the CART team. It's a child abduction response team for the state. So just to synopsize that quickly, if there's an Amber Alert, that group is ready 24/7. If a local county agency gives us a call or requests assistance, we can mobilize. It's about an 80 to 95 person unit consisting of investigators and all types of specialists, IT people, communications people, logistics people, and all those types of things that we can mobilize and access that in less than an hour to 2 hours and send it anywhere in the state to assist when it's needed. That's one of those units, the less it's needed, the better off we all are. To describe the investigations division as a whole, we have approximately 40 to 50 in-house investigators at any given time. We house those 2 additional task forces I told you about, the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force and the Secure Strike Force. When you compile all those resources at any given time, we can have up to 150 or so certified law enforcement officers available for anything that is needed. For instance, when things were happening in Salt Lake after the last few months or other areas where there's been any kind of disturbance, if those agencies call, we'll send them whatever available assets we have to assist in any way possible, whether that be in a public disturbance, We send investigators out to assist on homicides in rural areas and different places. We have investigators. Our average investigator here probably has around 20 to 25 years experience. Our least experienced investigators are 10 to 15-year investigators. And then there's some here with over 40 years and a large group between 20 to 35 years. So it's an experienced group, highly specialized training over the years. We have the advantage here of being able to kind of go out and seek out individuals with specialized expertise, depending on what our needs are, the community needs are. For instance, there's times a high emphasis is put on bilingual individuals. There's times where a high emphasis is put on forensic, people with forensic backgrounds that can do phone technology, computer technology, those types of things. There's times where the secure strike force, where we're working in the minority populations and those types of things, where we're looking for specific individuals. We just were mandated 2 years ago. It's HB 281, House Bill 281 mandates us to take any request for review of first-degree felony aggravated types of cases. Primarily they're sexual assaults, rape cases. If those have been declined or not followed through on, and the victim wants it looked at, a second or third look, whatever the case may be, by statute, we take those, we review them from the prosecutorial level and the investigative level, and if follow-up needs to be done, we do that. If not, we can at least go back to the victim through their lawyer usually and say, we've taken a look, this is what we believe, and we work out where we go from there. And we're getting more and more of those cases all the time. It's another stopgap look that the legislature put in to try to serve victims in the community. So I think it's a good thing. It's kept us very busy, and resources are tight, but we're happy to be doing that. Our primary funding here is state funding, general fund. We do have some federal grants that run through here. The Utah Trafficking in Persons Task Force is housed here. That's a conglomeration of NGO service providers, education, medical providers, law enforcement, all those different entities participate, as well as some other community groups. They meet once a month in person. The funds are used primarily for victim services of human trafficking, but also occasionally for investigative needs and things like that. And that money is dispersed. It doesn't stay within the Attorney General's office. It's used by all those different entities. We have a contract with the University of Utah that does our research and provides us data on what the task force is producing. So if you know anything about federal grants, you report regularly on what you're doing and how those funds are being used. So that is also housed here within our agency. The other thing, and it's kind of new wave, if you will, there are private entities, as I spoke to you about in that case unit, corporations that have decided to try to be a part of the solution and put up not just ask or draw resources, but actually put up financial and other logistics supports. You'd be surprised at the type of intel and the type of resources that those large corporations have to track crime and crime patterns and location crime information. It's a wealth of resource that the taxpayers aren't paying for, that these corporations are. We also have individual donors and nonprofits that donate to specific units. The Internet Crimes Against Children's unit in specific gets generous donations from the private community that are used to further the investigations of the crimes against our children in the community. I talked a lot, and that's probably long enough for a minute. So if you have questions or anything, happy to take those.
Yes, Leo, we do have 2 questions that have come through so far. The first one from George: how do you decide cases to go to the Attorney General's office from other state jurisdictions?
There are a couple ways. The normal, most common way is we get a request from that agency, whichever agency originally had the case. requesting our assistance or to take the case. We're happy to do either one. We're happy to follow or to lead, whichever we have to do to provide the resource that is needed and bring a case to resolution. Occasionally, we are asked by the legislature or a city or a county or a mayor or a governor to look into specific cases and things like that, which we always do and will. We have a complaint line where we take citizen complaints all day, 5 days a week. They can call off hours too, and we'll pick those up as quickly as we can. If those fall under our jurisdiction, we would look into them. So the Attorney General's office has specific legislative mandates where we are the agency of primary jurisdictions. I'm not going to name all those, but some of those I've already referenced: human trafficking, document fraud mills, internet crimes against children, those types of things, political corruption. There are there are statutes that mandate our office to take those kinds of cases. Those we take on direct or any other way that they come in. A lot of the political cases, if it's a voter fraud or voter disruption type case, that will be referred to us through the Lieutenant Governor's office, because they're the office of primary jurisdiction on elections issues. So people or entities will contact them. They will look into it and either resolve it, or if they believe there could be a criminal aspect or element to it, they'll refer it to us and we'll take that and run with it. I throw that out because it's timely right now. So the cases come in various ways, both state, local, or even federal. There are cases a federal agency will look into, decide it either doesn't fall in their jurisdiction or they can't take it for some reason. They'll reach out and ask us if we're willing to take a look. Here's a unique thing I didn't describe, and it's very important to understand the Attorney General's office. Our law enforcement group is embedded with our prosecutorial group. So our lawyers and our investigators work hand in hand every day of the week, all day. We have instant access to legal opinion, to legal resources, to get search warrants, or at least request search warrants, to screen cases in real time. So we could be out executing a warrant and come to a decision of should we or shouldn't we. And we may know from a law enforcement perspective, but we may want a liability perspective or a legal perspective. You can immediately contact those prosecutors. Each of those units has prosecutors specifically assigned to them, so specialized in the types of cases that they do. It's a very effective and proficient way. Here's the question people always: separation of power, right? Housing investigators or law enforcement and prosecutors. People question that all the time. It could not be a more effective approach to doing investigations and proactive law enforcement. I was a doubter when I came here after 20 years in corrections. Honestly, you tried to keep your distance from prosecutors and cops, and we only went to see them when we needed warrants, and they were probably just about as happy to see us. And that's the way most of us were raised in law enforcement. It's a new world where real-time communication and the instant exchange of those law enforcement backgrounds and legal backgrounds. The line is very black and white. The cases are law enforcement's up until the time an investigation is completed. Once an investigation is completed and it's turned over or screened with the prosecutors, if they choose to take that case belongs to the prosecutors. So in the front end, we're the lead, getting the information, obtaining information, submitting for warrants, subpoenas, those types of things. They're there to guide, to give opinion, to say yes or no, approve or disapprove of a request. Once that case is screened and they take it, our role falls to what their role was. We're there to assist if they need follow-up, to answer any further questions they need, do further interviews, seek more evidence, but they direct that. So the role, it's a really natural flip of the roles, and it's a very clear delineation. Nobody's confused about who's running what at any given time, and it's a seamless shift that happens in minutes. Can happen right now. I could be in the middle of an investigation an hour from now. I'm in a assistant role. to a prosecutor. So that's a very unique dynamic within this office here.
Thank you for those answers. We have two questions from Connie Reed, who I would like to thank for bringing you to us today. She's an Osher volunteer who recruited you for Lunch and Learn. So
Yep.
thank you both.
Good lady.
Connie asks, could you tell us about some of the high-profile cases your group investigated that we may have seen in the news?
Yeah, I'll talk about a couple just from this year. We were involved, and we actually were the lead agency in an adoption ring scam allegations. The victims were primarily Marshallese individuals. Young women were becoming pregnant in the Marshall Islands, and then they were being brought to the United States to deliver those babies for adoption. That there are laws that's against the law on its surface. The fact of the matter is there were people in the United States that were running these businesses, this particular businesses. Person running it was an attorney and also an elected official in the Arizona area. Once we got the complaints, we looked into it. When we believed there could be criminal activity, we contacted Arizona Attorney General's office, as well as the Arkansas Attorney General's office, who connected us to the U.S. Attorney's office in Arkansas, and probably a dozen different agencies from those three states jumped in and combined resources to investigate. There were dozens and dozens of women being brought from the Marshall Islands. They were being flown in at times days before delivery, at times a month or two before delivery. Their medical costs were being paid by the company, but the real people paying it were the individuals trying to adopt the children. The Marshallese individuals certainly are culturally different than we are here in mainland United States. Their understanding of the laws are very not what they would be had they been educated in mainland United States. So their education system is different. Their socioeconomic circumstances are different. They were being paid very little to give up their children for adoption. The people running that trade were making a lot, thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars over the years. And the adoptive families were stuck in the middle with very little legal guidance. This organization was falling under the purview of any state, federal, or local agency. And so it had gone on for years. We were able to get into that investigation. It took almost a year in total. We made arrests. We sent investigators and prosecutors to the Marshall Islands. That's kind of the resource that it took. We coordinated the takedown of that organization in 3 different states with all those various entities that I described earlier. That individual has already pled guilty to all charges, certainly the state charges in Arizona and Utah. He has pled guilty to. I believe he's pled guilty at this time to the U.S. Attorney, the federal charges in Arkansas. That I'd have to check for sure, but I believe that date has passed. And then he will be sentenced. A lot of that information is public now, so you can look that up. Those are adjudicated cases, so it becomes public information. That was one high-profile case. We had one just recently where we've done a multiple months-long investigation with Salt Lake City PD on a notorious hotel or inn in Salt Lake City that us old-timers have known about and spent a fair amount of time there when I was in adult probation and parole and those types of things, as well as with narcotics units. But Salt Lake City Inn, it was on the news. We had news stations were out that night. There was a large human trafficking investigation. There was a lot of prostitution going on there, drug distribution, gun sales, and human trafficking where women were being prostituted against their will. And that's a whole hour topic itself on human trafficking and what constitutes human trafficking. But it was a large criminal organization. Charges were brought against the owner as well as a manager, and I believe some other individuals there. It's been going on for years. We've been looking at it for months. Salt Lake City, it's been a thorn in their side for months. So it was a very gratifying case to remove those young women from those circumstances, shut down all kinds of other criminal activity that were going on. And I know we got a lot of thanks from the local community that we're glad to see that at least temporarily shut down. And if nothing else, at least the individuals that were perpetrating those crimes are trying to be held accountable. So those are two.
Super. Thank you for those answers. A more broadly framed question, again from Connie, is how big is the problem of human trafficking in Utah?
Yeah, it's all around us. It's all around us every day. It's in all of our communities. Our cases range from one like I just described, running out of a hotel. We've made many cases against massage parlors over the last several years since the strike force was started, to 15-year-old individual victims from high schools or junior highs. We took down a case, it's probably, I'm getting old now, but it was probably 3 or 4 years ago. The suspect's name was Victor Rax. We identified over 68 victims. Most of those were young boys from age 10 to 17, where he had groomed them. He was sexually abusing them. He was sending them out to traffic narcotics on his behalf. He was making hundreds of thousands of dollars. He was illegal in the country. And most of the kids were from minority backgrounds, vulnerable, and from socioeconomic circumstances that the kids weren't just doing it for themselves, they were doing it to support their families. It was a tragic case. He hung himself pending charges while he was in jail. So unfortunately, none of us got the gratification of seeing the justice fully played out. I guess you can have a perspective on if justice played out or not. But fact of the matter is, I believe we had 63 or 68 children, 10 to 17-year-olds, identified as victims that he had been perpetrating on over a decade, that we could go back and document instances where he had been confronted or stopped, and he had young boys with him. So that was going on in all the junior highs and he was recruiting in the parks, the junior highs and high school throughout the Utah or Salt Lake Valley, I'm sorry, and occasionally into Davis, Weber, and Utah County. That was right underneath our nose. That was going on in public. He was picking up these boys from school, having them slough, or he'd pick them up after school, and then he was out running them, and not only sexually abusing them, but labor trafficking them also. So that's another example, and that's how prevalent it is. There are a lot. Let me rephrase that. Often business fronts, legitimate business fronts, are used to shield not only the money, but the actions that are going on when it involves human trafficking. I believe it is second only to narcotics trafficking for the amount of profit that is made on a criminal activity worldwide right now.
Wow, that is a distressing answer, but thank you for following up on that. We have another question, this time from Bonnie. She says, you've emphasized years of experience of staff. There has been some concern expressed that implicit bias might be worse in more experienced staff. Would you please comment?
Yeah, that's a touchy subject right now. So I don't think any of us that have been around law enforcement for any period of time do not believe there is some implicit bias. I'll speak for myself. I'm not speaking for the agency right now. I don't believe anybody in any part of society can look you in the eye and say they don't have some type of implicit bias. It's part of who we are. It's part of how we were raised. It's part of who we associate with. It's part of the careers we chose. So to me, and I can speak for the office here, what we want to do is become more cognizant in real time to those implicit biases, and learn how, and not just how, but what we need to do to factor that in to our decisions and what we do. Part of that virtual reality training. And implicit bias is a pretty controversial word, I'll tell you right now. There are those that if you use that term, they will tell you it doesn't exist. And then you get into definitions and semantics. I'm going to skip all that and just say we all have prejudices and biases. Everyone, doesn't matter what race, creed, religion, it doesn't matter. We all have it. It's how you, first of all, how you acknowledge that you have it, what self-realization you can have as individuals and groups, and then how you address it. And that's the conversation that needs to be taking place right now. It is. It's factored into everything we're doing in this agency right now. Our Attorney General is a minority who represents several different minority groups in his background. He's very cognizant and aware of it. He's experienced it. He's lived on different ends of that, different perspectives of that from his childhood to where he is now. So he brings a lot to the table there. And it's something that needs to be worked on. I don't know if I answered your question, but that's about as well as I'm going to do right now.
I think that was a very even-handed answer. So, the next question from Marshall. Money spent regarding the COVID pandemic has had large amounts, and there have been problems with what results were produced, such as lab results, iPhone app. Is there any investigation into these no-bid contracts?
I can only speak for our office. We do not have any open investigations on those things right now, nor have we had any of those referred to our agency that I'm aware of. And normally I'm one of the first ones that would know what's coming in, although that's not always the case. So when I'm speaking, I can only speak from my chair and what I know. We have not had those referred to us, and to my knowledge, we have no open investigations into that right now.
Fair enough, thank you. We have an anonymous question about white collar crimes. What can you tell us about those?
Yeah, it's probably the most under-advertised crime, under-educated to the public. It consumes a large amount of resource within the Utah Attorney General's office. There isn't a day of the week that multiple investigators aren't investing large-scale embezzlement cases, large-scale fraud, internet fraud, identity fraud, social security fraud. I mean, all those things fall under white-collar. Retail crime isn't considered a white-collar crime, although it can turn quickly. But a vast amount of resources within the Utah Attorney General's office, both investigative and prosecutorial, are dedicated to white-collar crime. And those are some of the most complicated, difficult cases from an investigative and prosecutorial standpoint that you can have as far as resource. They're not as black and white, right? A shooting is fairly black and white. You got a victim, you got a perpetrator, you have a weapon, and that type of thing. These white-collar crimes are very sophisticated. Usually, if they're any good at it, they're very educated individuals that are perpetrating them, who have spent a lot of their time, a lot of their life figuring out how to get away with whatever it is they're trying to take from somebody. So that in turn demands a lot of investigative resource, and proving it at trial, it's not as black and white as a violent crime or a narcotics crime or that type of crime. So a lot of resources going into it. We're happy to do the cases. They come in droves every day. A lot of those come in through our complaint line, our constituent affairs line. And it can be an individual, it can be a group of individuals, it could be a company. But we focus heavily on crimes, white-collar crimes committed against vulnerable populations, the elderly, individuals with any type of limitations at all, minorities, because of the language barrier, they're very susceptible. So we prioritize those as best we can. It's not perfect by any means, and we get to them as quickly as we can and get them to the prosecutors. So
Thank you again for that answer. We have another anonymous question. Has the Attorney General's office been involved in COVID-19 in the prisons and the rights of prisoners in all the state and county facilities?
Yeah, so I read the same article that the individual that asked the question did probably this morning or saw it on the news. So most of the county jails are fall under county jurisdiction. So the district attorney's office, county sheriffs, and those groups. We would only go in and get involved there if they requested us to. The state prison, there are certainly attorney general lawyers and prosecutors assigned to the Department of Corrections that advise and work with them every day. So I can tell you, I have no doubt our office is involved on an investigative standpoint. I don't believe we've had to go into the state prison or any county jail. I will tell you this, the Attorney General took the lead when COVID first hit. From the day we were all told to socially distance and isolate and go home from our jobs in many cases, he went out and solicited the private corporations throughout the United States and here locally. We supplied a great deal of PPE to law enforcement and jails throughout the state from day one, months before everything else came up on board. We were supplying everything from gloves to sanitizer to gowns and all those types of things, masks. We found corporations that were able to access masks being brought in from outside of the United States in spite of embargo and everything else, and find legal ways to have that get to first responders. It was also being supplied to firefighters as well as hospitals and those in need. Thousands and thousands and thousands of pieces of PPE and gallons of sanitizer, most of it being donated by private entities and individuals and companies in the state of Utah. And there were some stories on those. I wish I could give them the recognition that they deserve, but I can't. But I will tell you this, the private entities, the businesses in this community came up big for PPE, for first responders, including all those groups I just responded to. And that includes jails and inmates and the individuals working inside of jails.
Thank you. That seems like a silver lining to have that much support. We have two questions about phone scam calls. These calls come from outside the state or county. What can your office do about these calls? And some even appear to be calls from a Utah phone number.
Yeah, so spoof calls, huge problem, not just here, but throughout the country. And we look into those. Some of them, to be honest with you, we'll get so many complaints on the same spoof or scam that once we've looked into it twice, even though we may get 24 more complaints, we can say that's coming from India or Turkey or Pakistan or the Bahamas. We have no jurisdiction there. So the answer is we can look into it. We have some highly, highly trained forensic individuals, especially in our internet crimes unit. So we can normally find the originating place for those calls, even if they're truncating those calls through different countries and states to where it has a Utah phone number. We're normally, not always, but certainly normally able to track those back and say that call came from India. At that point, we're done, other than putting up on our website, a caution to people: if you get this call, this is what it is. I encourage anybody who's receiving those, one of the first things you should do, besides not deal with those people at all, certainly don't send money or any of your information. If you even have an inkling that it doesn't sound right, tell them to call you back, get off, check our website, make a call to either our office or constituent affairs line, and we'll tell you if we're aware of the scam. Hopefully it's up on our website already. Like there's a ton of tax scams going on right now, right? The social or the Internal Revenue Service is going to come and arrest you, or they're getting a warrant for your arrest if you don't take care of those are all that if somebody's calling you saying it's the Internal Revenue Service, you better pay me now, that's a scam. If it's court saying pay your fine or pay your bill or pay your, that's a scam. None of those government entities are going to call you on the phone and say, give me your money now. So if it has any hint of that, it's a scam. Now, whether we can figure out who it is, how it is, we'll usually figure out how they're doing it and where they're doing it from. If it's not in the United States, certainly we can't touch them. That would have to be the FBI or somebody on that level. If it's in the United States, or especially in the state of Utah, then we'll put every resource we have into bringing those individuals to account and try to recover money. But if it's a phone call, honestly, and they're telling you pay me now or something really bad's going to happen, I'd hesitate. I'm not going to say it never could be legitimate, but that's just not the way it works, and especially if they're representing themselves as a government entity.
Thank you. So are there resources on your website for ways we can protect ourselves from internet scams and
Yes, yeah.
phone scams?
Yeah, sorry to interrupt you. Yes, there are. We have we have individuals that are on our website and updating it every day, especially on the white collar type of stuff. There are programs funded by the state, and also there's some federal programs where you can report white collar crime and it'll go into a queue. One nice thing for law enforcement is we can look at those, and that it'd be the same as if you sent your information into the Salt Lake County website or Salt Lake City or West Valley. We got to be better. There's an article in the paper today. We got to be better at sharing information. If you haven't all read that one also. And they're right, we do all need to be better at sharing information. But anytime you contact one of the lines, you're not only helping yourself, you're serving your fellow citizens, because the more those things are brought to the forefront, the more various entities are going to advertise and publish that information and look into it, quite frankly. So I would always encourage you to access our website on white collar stuff. There's human trafficking, different articles and education up on there occasionally, as well as all the other areas. Our office, ironically, the criminal side gets the most publicity or notoriety, whatever you want, in our office, but the civil side is much, much larger. The number of lawyers and stuff, resources assigned to the civil side. So there's a great deal of civil information that's available also. If it's not there, then you still are looking for it, call our constituent affairs line and tell them specifically what it is you're looking for, and they will do everything they can to connect you to whoever it is would be best for you to speak to.
So is there a place to report phone numbers? If you get a scam call, you can block it and then report the number?
Yeah, you can do that. You can do that at our constituent affairs, or there are programs online where you can go in and enter that, and it'll electronically. It's really what law enforcement use of technology, and the prosecutors and lawyers have tried to do is make it as convenient as possible, give you as many different ways as possible to report that. That in fairness and full disclosure, those come in by the hundreds over a month-long period of time. And certainly if we see, look, here's the same number, it's come in 25 times, that's going to move to the top of the list, right? We prioritize it. Or if the elderly community seems to be a primary target, and we can associate that with reports, we'll move that right to the top, because that's a vulnerable group, or young children, or anybody with limitations that we try to prioritize. You never can stay up on all those. So what I'm telling you is, don't get too frustrated any more than you have to. Be as persistent or relentless as you can be. I get it. It's one bad thing that happened to you, and you have a whole life to live besides that. So we certainly don't expect you to make that your all-encompassing 8-hour-a-day project. But no problem bugging us. Bug us. That's what we're here for. You pay us, so you may as well use us, right? So be relentless. Be a pest if you want to. Be polite if you can. That'll be appreciated, and we'll respond as quickly as we can.
Thank you for that answer. We have one final comment in the chat, maybe to warn people for other possible hazards from Randy. He says, recently in broad daylight in a busy parking lot, someone crawled underneath my SUV and stole the catalytic converter. I was surprised by the brazenness of this theft. I reported this to police, but there was nothing they could do since these are impossible to track.
Okay, that's
experience.
yeah. I have not done a catalytic converter investigation in all my years, but we do have cases where it's that bold and brazen, which is even more surprising. And there are a lot of cameras around if nobody's noticed. To crawl in a parking lot underneath a car, that is brazen and stupid. We usually catch the stupid ones though. They're usually on a camera in the parking lot. We can get their license plate as they jump back in the car. But yeah, I would have no expertise or knowledge of how you would, after the fact, like track a catalytic converter if it was being sold in a chop shop or through a mechanic shop or on KSL. I don't know if they have unique markings or serial numbers. That's outside my expertise. I have guys here that did do a lot of auto theft cases and stuff that might be able to answer you, but I'm not the guy. Sorry.
Well, let it be a warning to us all. We need to park near the cameras, I suppose. All right, well, that was our last question that we had. Thank you so much for spending your lunch hour with us. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for your time and allowing me to be here. If anybody has follow-up that they want to do, I'll give you my email address and you can just send me an email question. I'll respond back to you. Remind me who you're with so I know who I'm talking to. But it's L and then Lucey, so 2 L's, LLUCEY at agutah.gov. And you're welcome to reach out anytime.
Well, thank you. That's very generous of you.
Stay safe and stay healthy.
To our members. All right, thank you everyone for joining us, and we'll see you at another Lunch and Learn. And once again, Leo and Connie, thank you for making this possible for all of us.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Bye-bye now.